Janabalabha Giribardari Jai Gopi Janabalabha Giribardari Yasoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana Yasoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jai Om Vishnupad, Paramhamsa Parvadikacharya, Tara Sata Shri Srimad, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki, Grantred Srimad Bhagavatam Ki, Samveda Bhakti Vrinda Ki, Gaur Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Shtapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamhahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhunam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitam Cha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavan Eshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So we are on Canto 3, Chapter 4. Oh. Yeah, tangled in this. We are wired today in two different ways. What is going on here? Okay, all right. All right, so yeah. Shri Sukha Uvacha Shri Shuka Uvacha Iti Saha Vidurena Vishwamurter Iti Saha Vidurena Vishwamurter Guna Kataya Sudaya Plavitor Tapa Guna Kataya Sudaya Plavitor Tapa Kshanam Iva Puline Yamasva Sustam Kshanam Iva Puline Yamasva Sustam Samurshita au Pagavirnisham Tatogat Samurshita au Pagavirnisham Tatogat Shri Shuka Uvacha Hiti Saha Vidurena Vishwamurter Guna Kataya Sudaya Plavitoru Tapa Shanam Iva Puline Namasva Sustam Samushita Aupagavarnisham Tatogat Shri Shuka Uvacha Iti saha vidurena vishvamurter. Guna kataya sudaya Guna kataya sudaya plavitorutapa. Shanam iva puline yamasvasustam. Samushita aupagavir nisham tatogat. Shri Sukavacha Isa Vidurena Vishamurtir Guna Kataya Sudaya Plavitorutapa Shanam Iva Puline Yamasvasustam Samushita apagavir nisham tatogat.
Shri Shukavacha
Shri Sukavacha
Iti saha vidurena vishvamurte
Iti saha vidurena vishvamurter
Guna kataya sudaya plavitorutapaha
Guna kataya sudaya plavitorutapa
Shanam eva puline yamasvasustam
Shanam iva pulide yamasvasustam
Shita upagavinishan tatogat
Samushita avarnishantatogat Shri Shuka Uvacha Iti saha vidurena vishvamurter Guna kataya sudaya plavitorutapa Shanam iva puline yamasvasustam Shamushita aupagavir nisham tatogat. Ladies, anyone? Shri Sukha Uvacha Iti saha vidurena vishvamurter Guna kataya sudaya plavitorutapa Shanam iva puline yamasvasustam Samushitau aupagavir nisham tatogat Shri Sukha Uvacha Iti saha vidurena vishvamurter Guna kataya sudaya plavitorutapa Shanam iva puline yamasvasustam Samushita aupagavir nisham tatogat Shri Sukha Uvacha Shri Sukadev Goswami said Iti thus Saha along with Vidurena Vidura Vishvamurtehe of the universal person Gunakataya in the discourse of transcendental qualities Suddhaya nectarian Plavita urutapaha overwhelmed by great affliction Kshanam moment Iva like that Puline on the bank of Yamas vasus tam River Jamuna. Samusita, passed on. Aopagavihi, the son of Opagava or Uddhava. Nisham, the night. Tataha, thereafter. Ogat, went away. So the translation reads, Sukadeva Goswami said, O king, after thus discussing with Vidura the transcendental name, fame, qualities, etc., on the banks of the Yamuna, Uddhava was overwhelmed with great affliction. He passed the night as if it were a moment, and thereafter he went away. So I say, you please repeat. Shukadeva Goswami said, O king, after thus discussing with Vidura the transcendental name, fame, qualities, etc., on the banks of the Jamuna, Uddhava was overwhelmed with great affliction. He passed the night as if it were a moment, and thereafter he went away. So here's the purport. It's not a very long one. The word used here for Krishna is Vishwamurti. Both Uddhava and Vidura were in great affliction because of the Lord Krishna's departure. And the more they discussed the transcendental name, fame, qualities of the Lord, the more the picture of the Lord became visible to them everywhere. Such visualization of the transcendental form of the Lord is neither false nor imaginary, but is factual, absolute truth. When the Lord is perceived as Vishwamurti, it is not that he loses his personality or transcendental eternal form, but he becomes visible in the same form everywhere. Shri Sukha Uvacha Iti Sahavidarena Vishvamurtir Guna Kataya Sudaya Plavitorutapa Kshanam Iva Pulineya Masvasustam Samushita Alpagavarnisham Tatogat. Shukadeva Goswami said, O king, after thus discussing with Vidura the transcendental name, fame, qualities, etc., on the banks of the Yamuna, Uddhava was overwhelmed with great affliction. He passed the night as if it were a moment, and thereafter he went away. This chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam is discussing, it broke it into two sections, at least according to Burijan, from verse 1 to verse 22 or 23 thereabouts. It describes this meeting between Krishna and Uddhava, and later Maitreya dropping in on it. And then from 34 up to the end, at that point, we hear about this going of the separate ways between Uddhava and Vidura. Of course, Vidura has been sent by Uddhava to meet with Maitreya, as we learned that because Vidura was in the age bracket with Maitreya and much older than Uddhava, Uddhava did not take the role of explaining transcendental philosophy to Vidura, although Vidura was actually eager that that would happen. And so we see a couple of things happening here simultaneously, and that is that we learn that spiritual progress may not be necessarily hinging on any social position or one's age in life. Sometimes people who are advanced in years have very little spiritual knowledge, and sometimes people who are very young already have a great spiritual wealth of wisdom. So, nevertheless, we see on the other side of the coin that a particular social etiquette is being observed here, and that is that Uddhava did not take the role of instructing because he felt that role was better carried by Maitreya, who was in the same age bracket. And we hear that Maitreya was an impersonalist, but one thing I always try to point out is there's a difference between being a Mayavadi and just being an impersonalist. There are those who have heard about the transcendental form, name, qualities, and pastimes of the Lord and specifically reject them. And there are those who just have maybe heard of them in passing, but have not really come to any conclusion about it. And therefore, they are focused on the impersonal absolute, the Brahman. So such people are not offenders to the Lord. They just have not gotten far enough along in spiritual life to have recognized that the Lord has a form, and that that form is not an imagination. It's not something just for the sake of helping people to visualize what's unvisualizable. It's in fact more important than the Brahman or the impersonal. And a few verses back in this chapter, we heard that in hearing the discourse between Krishna and Uddhava, Maitreya comes to that realization. So prior to that, Maitreya is in fact one of these impersonalists. He's not a Mayavadi, but he's an impersonalist. He has no specific knowledge about the Supreme Lord, but he's not opposed to it or antagonistic to it. And we hear, you know, other important personalities in Vedic literature who are also in the same category. The four Kumaras were impersonalists, but they were not Mayavadis. And by simply smelling the tulsi leaves offered to the feet of the Supreme Lord, they became personalists. Oh, we hear that Sukadev himself was an impersonalist at a certain point, but became turned to the personal conception of the Supreme Lord. If one really studies the Vedas without the agency of having the benefit of a bona fide spiritual master in disciplic succession, one will be confronted with a vast collection of knowledge, most of which does not focus on the personality of Godhead. So naturally, it's quite likely that a person will miss that understanding if they don't have the help of a bona fide spiritual master in disciplic succession. So one can read the Vedas, and if one does, we will just wind up going to the Vedas kind of at random, and the likelihood that one would start with the Srimad Bhagavatam is not very likely. So as a result, you would come away with the impression that really the purpose of the Vedas is to perform a bunch of pious sacrifices so one may be elevated in this lifetime, go back to the heavenly worlds when one quits the body, or at least enjoy a very happy and opulent life here in the world, this material world. And that some rare few might reach out to this mysterious, impersonal thing that's at the center of the universe that can't be spoken of exactly, that doesn't have any features, that pervades everything. So the Upanishads make a great discussion of this. But unless one reads Srimad Bhagavatam, one will not understand that higher than that is the personality of Godhead. And so this is considered hidden or undisclosed in the Vedas. It's a confidential aspect of the Vedas. So in Bhagavad Gita, in the 9th chapter, we have the confidential knowledge, you know. Krishna says, idam tu te guyatamam pravakshamyanu shuyave jnanam vijnanamastikyam. What is it? Yajgatva mokshise shubhat, I think is the last line of that verse. And so this is Krishna speaking to Arjuna, that this is confidential knowledge, and it can be revealed only by someone who is anasuyave, who is not envious. So being envious is a disqualification. And in the material world, everybody is mostly envious. We're envious of first Krishna, and then we're envious of others, because sometimes it's said that when we come to the material world, we become engaged in a God project. So we are, it's called the God project. We are trying to prove to the rest of the world, all the entities in the entire universe, that we are God and they are not. So this is naturally a point of conflict. And, you know, people do it. If you have a few material opulences because of some pious activity in some previous life, you may actually get away with thinking like this for a while. But many people, because of the fact that in their past lifetimes they were not very pious, they don't have a lot of opulence or a lot of prestige. You know, they're low in the 6, you know, opulences that Parashara Muni claims, you know, beauty, fame, wealth, knowledge, renunciation, and strength, you know, so they don't have a great abundance of any of those 6 qualities. And so it's hard to do a really, you know, thorough, you know, pumping God project when you don't have a lot of opulences. You have to kind of wing it. But for people who have some wealth, or people who have some fame, or have some strength, or political power, such people are actually convinced that to some extent their God project is working. And as long as we are envious of Krishna, and as long as we're trying to put others in their place so that we can be up above everyone else, then we will never understand Krishna. And there are many types of spiritual life that people consider spiritual, but according to the Vedic knowledge are not actually spiritual life. It's easy to mistake something that is roughly in the category of spiritual life, but misses some essential element Like, for instance, this idea of personality. This section, harkens back, we hear in some of these previous verses in this particular chapter, that Brahma was instructed by the Supreme Lord, these Chatur Sloki, these 4 verses, which are in the 9th chapter of the 2nd canto. And there we learn that Krishna is telling Brahma that he is existed before everything and he's the source of everything, and that if something doesn't have a connection to him, it's actually Maya, or that which is not. And that he will bless Brahma to be able to create the material universes, which is his service. That's Brahma's service. He creates the material world, he gives it shape. And he'll be able to do that without becoming mentally attracted or getting this kind of envious mentality of thinking that one is a great overlord, a great controller, which is a disqualification for actually understanding the Supreme Lord. So everything is about relationships. We were discussing last night, because today is actually the first day of Damodar, but some people already in some parts of the world celebrated it yesterday, and we did too. It's 26th 2nd Avenue. There was a program set up, and so we discussed about this prayers by Satyavrata Muni, which discuss various relationships, and it appears that Satyavrata Muni is very attracted to the Lord in his baby form. So some people are attracted like that. Some are attracted to the Lord in his form as a young boy. Some are attracted as servants. Some are attracted as friends. The gopis are attracted as lovers. So all we have ever known in this material life, even in this particular one that we remember, what to speak of many gone by, all we have ever known is relationships. Because being in a particular place, or being around a certain group of people or a certain type of people, creates kind of a bubble in and of itself. If we associate with people who have very gross qualities, who are very attracted by sex life and attracted by intoxication and things like that, our life will have a certain flavor to it. The relationships will have a certain quality to them. And it won't be a good quality. There'll be kind of a nastiness to it. And we see that. If you go to Manhattan, 42nd Street, or one of these other places, lower Manhattan, where there are a lot of bars, you just go into the bars, and what do you see there? You see nasty things there. You look on the floor and you see stains, and you wonder, is it poop? Is it puke? Is it, snot? What is it? It's some gross substance that was dropped there in some way or another. And things smell bad. People deal with each other harshly. There is a very serious mood of trying to objectivize or to get one over on someone else. There is this, very nasty kind of interaction there. But if you come to a temple, you see flowers, you smell nice things, things are clean, you hear about edifying things, and of course, in the temple, everyone might not be of the most pure in their spiritual intent. However, there is a lot of information, and we learn how to fake it to some extent, how to at least engage in relationships with others in a way that we don't cause them distress, at least not much of it, we hope. And so relationships have a lot to do with association. And if we're a good kind of association, we will have nice relationships. And if we're in a rough association, then we ourselves will be constantly on guard and constantly engaged in our God project, trying to spar with those people in our immediate circle. So in this chapter, we're going to learn there's some mysteries. The Supreme Lord and his pastimes are always mysterious. We hear this theme throughout this chapter. Why is Krishna doing away with the Yadu dynasty? You know, Satyaki makes an insult to Kritavarman that turns into a brawl, which essentially annihilates the entire Yadu dynasty. Why does Krishna come to the earth? And he, as we heard earlier, associates with gopis or with wives, you know. Why does he ask questions from Uddhava when obviously he knows everything? Why does he act like a human being when there's no need to? Why does he engage in what appears to be fruitive work when actually he already owns everything and there's no need for it? Seems mysterious, and there's no way around it. You know, the Supreme Lord is mysterious. But we can learn a little bit more about some of these things and see that the Supreme Lord acts in human society as if he was just one of us. And he likes to do that. Although sometimes he pops out of his role as just one of us and lifts a mountain here and there or something like that. And does a few of those kind of things that most of us would find a little on the difficult side, even with the right software. So we would have to try to recognize this mysterious thing in these pastimes of Krishna. You know, we hear in Chaitanya Charitamrita that Krishna comes to the material world for internal and for external reasons. And the external reasons are so that he can display his pastimes and hopefully attract a few people who would then want to follow him and go back home, back to Godhead, which is the case here with Uddhava. Krishna affirms that Uddhava is going back home after this lifetime. And his other reason for coming here is for enjoying his own pastimes, or doing things that are things that he wants to do. He does them in the material world. So this is why we look at Krishna's pastimes, and some things are very easy to understand. Other things make no sense at all. They're very unusual. The killing of the Yadu dynasty. And what to speak of killing the Yadus? And they died during a drunken brawl. How does that look? You know, it's certainly not the best PR in the world for the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his family, you know. But nonetheless, this is the way it happened. And sometimes, you know, the Supreme Lord actually plays up these kinds of mysterious events, or even appears to create the aura that something is drastically wrong, you know, either with him or with his family or something else. And so these things are carefully studied by the acharyas, you know. It was a long time in my progress in Krishna consciousness before I even came across the idea of these pastimes that actually promote illusion in some way. And they're described in the Chaitanya Charitamrita and Madhya Lila, 23rd chapter, verse 117 and 118, where Lord Chaitanya is explaining to, I think, Sanatana Goswami about these illusion-promoting pastimes, which I'll just touch on here. The Mahishi Haranam, the stealing of the wives, the Kesha avatar, the hair incarnations of Krishna and Balaram, and the Maushalya Leela, which is what is being talked about here, the destruction of the Yadu Dynasty. So many people come across these and they think, how can this be God? You know, how can these how can God be killed by an archer shooting him in the foot with an arrow? How did Krishna's wives get stolen by some dacoits, you know? How did, you know, the Yadu dynasty die after an argument during a drunken brawl? You know, these things promote the wrong understanding or the wrong idea, unless, of course, one hears from the acharyas. And when you understand it in the proper context, you can see that these things are actually quite interesting. And the Supreme Lord is a good playwright. He comes up with some interesting stuff. There's nothing dull or programmatic, no filler in Krishna's pastimes. It's all very mysterious and interesting things. And as is explained, you know, by Bhishma Dev, that no one can understand the pastimes of Krishna completely, but we can certainly understand some of the more unusual things if we are in the association of devotees, in the right association, the right mood, and struggling ourselves to continue our progress in Krishna consciousness. So I want to leave some time for questions and back and forth. Any questions or comments about what we've discussed so far? Any corrections, Jayadvaita? I have to be careful because he's got a stick now, so it's a little dangerous, you know. Yeah. An impersonalist is just someone who is not aware of the importance of Krishna's actual transcendental form. It's not that they've rejected it. Mayavadis are those who've heard about it and have specifically rejected it and think that Krishna's form is mundane. And those who worship Krishna's form are mistaken, because they have not realized that the formless is actually the highest thing. So this is the distinction there. They are offensive, and that's why, you know, Lord Chaitanya says that one associates with Mayavadis, one is ruined. You know? We have to, you know, asat sanga tyag, you know, we have to give up unwanted association. And there are, you know, three categories of unwanted association. Giving up of those who are too attached to sex life, those who are dharma dvajis, those who are, you know, pretenders in spiritual life, and those who are, I forget, there's another category in the Harinam Chintamani that's described. These, Mayavadis, that's it. That's the other category. We've been talking about it. So we have to disassociate with them. Of course, in the material world, it's impossible to avoid the association of people. But by association here, we really mean taking instruction or sharing our heartfelt thinking and desires with those who are contaminated either by Mayavada or, sex life, or by pretending to be someone in a spiritual role for the sake of some kind of mundane profit or some kind of mundane worship or whatever it might be. It's interesting, really, that the Supreme Lord can be addressed with contradictions. And we see this as a common thing that's in the Vedas in many places. The Supreme Lord walks, but he does not walk. He's very near, yet he's far away. He's inside of everything, yet he's outside. I enter, yet I do not enter. This kind of, speaking would make no sense at all if it was about one of us, a mundane living entity. But these things are actually accurate when you think about the Supreme Lord, when you're talking about someone who includes everything and is actually at the center of everything. If he includes everything, that must mean he's the left, he's the right, he's above, he's below, he's the right, he's the wrong, he's the good, the bad, he's every possible opposite. So he encompasses every contradiction you could possibly imagine. And therefore, anything you can say about Krishna, you could say the opposite thing, and it's true too, in some sense. So that's a very interesting thing sometimes to ponder about the Supreme Lord. And in this way, we can understand what a special kind of entity he is. And although he has no need to do anything, he's still a great connoisseur of relationships, and that's what he's looking for. He doesn't need us for any purpose. Whatever we could do for the Supreme Lord, he's quite capable of doing himself, and much better than we could ever do it. However, it's not what we accomplish for the Lord that the Lord is actually relishing. He's relishing the attitude with which we do things for him. And that's what he actually savors. We cook food, we go on Sankirtan, we organize a program, we do some preaching, we, make some effort to help someone understand something about Krishna consciousness. All these things we do, if we're trying to do them in a mood of pleasing the Supreme Lord, then that's what the Supreme Lord actually savors. And that's why sometimes we see that we are being asked to do things by the Supreme Lord that are not at all easy. And, why is it that the Supreme Lord wants it, we want it, the scriptures say it, but we can't do it? So it seems paradoxical, if the Supreme Lord wants it and we want it and it's there in Scripture, why is it so hard to do? Because there's that struggle that we have to go through, where through struggling for the Supreme Lord, we are able to demonstrate how much intensity we can muster for doing something for the Supreme. So the material world is full of challenges, one minute after another. That's the nice thing about the material world, that whatever you're suffering with today, it'll be gone tomorrow, but there'll be something new. some new form of struggle or some new form of suffering that you'll have to contend with. So it's just the way that it is, you know. And through these difficulties that we overcome, we give Krishna something to savor in the relationship. And again, it all boils down to relationships, you know. We are not interested in getting on a giant diving board and diving into that old Brahma Jyoti and just merging out there. It's not really, you know, something that's attractive. Even before I came to Krishna consciousness, there was something a little terrifying about it, you know, that, you know, you depersonalize into something. It's just a little creepy in some way. If you had a machine, you know, over in the corner, it said, when you go into this machine, you will depersonalize into the Supreme. I won't even charge you any money. All you have to do is go into the machine. I think a lot of people have second thoughts about it. Yet this idea of, you know, trying to merge into the effulgence is, you know, eulogized and lauded and touted from the rooftops by various Mayavadi groups. Some of them are very, you know, strong in their, you know, pushing it forward. But it's not really spiritual life. We need a relationship, and a relationship with the Supreme. And if we're going to have a relationship with the Supreme, it's going to be mysterious. Because you're not going to be able to second guess Krishna in no time, in no way. And so your life will never be predictable. So it's 9 up now, unless there's a final question. We will put the cap on it here. Thank you for your kind attention. All glories to Srimad Bhagavatam, all glories to the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord. Hare Krishna.
Chandrasekhar Maharaj ki jai.